The storm outside was not normal. The rain hit the roof of the small wooden house like heavy stones, and the wind howled through the trees. Mark Cooper was sleeping in his bed. He was a 35-year-old man with brown hair and tired eyes. He was a single father to his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. They lived in a quiet place, far from the big city. Their house was next to a large scrapyard. Mark owned the scrapyard. He spent his days fixing old cars and machines. Suddenly, a loud sound shook the whole house. It was not thunder. It sounded like a giant metal object falling from the sky and crashing into the ground. The windows rattled, and the floor vibrated. Mark sat up in bed immediately, his heart beating fast. The noise was deafening, a mix of a roar and a screech. It came from the scrapyard behind the house. "Daddy!" Lily cried out from her room down the hall. Mark jumped out of bed and ran to her room. He opened the door and saw her sitting up, holding her teddy bear tightly. She looked scared. "It's okay, Lily," Mark said, trying to keep his voice calm. "It was just a loud storm. Don't worry. Go back to sleep." "But it shook the floor," Lily said. "I know. I will go check it out. It was probably just an old transformer blowing up or a tree falling. You stay here. I will be back in a minute." Mark grabbed his flashlight and a heavy raincoat. He put on his boots and walked out the back door. The rain was coming down hard, making it difficult to see. The wind pushed against him as he walked toward the scrapyard. He kept his flashlight pointed down, careful not to slip in the mud. As he got closer to the center of the yard, he saw smoke rising into the rainy air. The smell was strange. It smelled like burnt metal, mixed with something like ozone or electricity. Mark stepped over piles of old tires and rusted car parts. He shined his flashlight toward the smoke and froze. There was a massive hole in the ground. Inside the hole was a huge object. It was not an airplane, and it was not a satellite. It was a large, sleek craft. It looked like a giant black bullet. The surface was smooth and shiny, even through the rain and dirt. It was about the size of a bus. Mark had never seen anything like it before. It did not look like it was made by humans. Mark stood there in the rain, staring at the object. He felt a mix of fear and curiosity. He was a mechanic, so he loved machines, but this was something else. It looked alien. He walked slowly to the edge of the crater. The metal of the ship seemed to hum with a low vibration. He could feel it in his teeth. "Is anyone there?" Mark shouted over the sound of the rain. "Hello." There was no answer. Mark took a deep breath and decided to go down. He slid carefully down the muddy slope of the crater. When he reached the bottom, he realized how big the ship really was. It was towering over him. He walked up to the side of the ship and touched it. It was warm, despite the cold rain. The metal felt smooth, like glass, but as hard as diamond. He walked around the ship, looking for a door or a window. On one side, he saw a large crack in the hull. It looked like something had forced the ship open. Sparks of blue light were coming from the crack. Mark shined his flashlight inside. He gasped. The interior was glowing softly with violet lights. He saw panels with strange symbols that were not English. He saw pipes leaking some kind of glowing blue fluid. Mark climbed over a piece of broken metal and stuck his head inside the ship. "Is someone hurt?" he asked softly. He heard a low, painful moan coming from the darkness deep inside the ship. It was a sound that made his heart ache. It sounded like a living creature in pain. Mark knew he could not just walk away. If someone was dying inside there, he had to help. He climbed fully inside the ship. It was difficult because everything was broken and tilted at an angle. He made his way to the back of the craft, following the sound of the moans. He stepped over some debris and reached a large room that looked like a cockpit or a medical bay. There, lying on the floor, was a figure. Mark stopped and stared. It was definitely not a human. The being was huge. It was at least 12 feet tall. It had long, silver hair that seemed to float even though there was gravity. It had skin that looked like polished moonstone, pale and glowing slightly. The being was wearing a strange, tight-fitting suit that was torn in many places. Blue liquid, which Mark guessed was blood, was pooling on the floor around the figure. Mark was terrified. This was an alien. This was a monster from a movie. But the alien was unconscious. It looked weak. It looked hurt. Mark looked at the alien's face. Even through the cuts and bruises, he could see that the face had a noble, beautiful structure. It looked like a woman. A giant, alien woman. "You have got to be kidding me," Mark whispered to himself. He knew he should call the police or the army. But if he called them, they might take this creature away and hurt it, or dissect it. Or worse, what if the government came and took Lily away to keep them quiet? Mark looked at the alien again. She moaned again, a sound of pure suffering. Mark was a father. His instinct to help someone in pain was stronger than his fear. "Okay," Mark said. "Okay, let's get you out of here." Mark ran back to his workshop, which was a large shed at the edge of the scrapyard. He grabbed his heavy-duty engine hoist, a thick chain, and a heavy blanket. He also grabbed his first aid kit and a bottle of water. He ran back to the ship, getting soaked by the rain. He set up the hoist near the entrance of the ship. He climbed back inside to the alien. She was incredibly heavy. It was like trying to lift a statue made of lead. Mark groaned and strained his muscles. He managed to loop the chains under her arms, being careful not to hurt her more than she already was. Using the engine hoist, which he normally used to lift car engines out of cars, he slowly dragged the giant alien out of the ship. It was a slow and difficult process. The mud made the ground slippery. Mark slipped and fell, getting covered in mud, but he stood up again and kept going. Finally, he pulled her out of the crater and onto the flat ground of the yard. He covered her with the large blanket to hide her from view, just in case anyone was watching. He then used the hoist to lift her onto an old flatbed trailer he used for hauling scrap. He drove the tractor slowly to his workshop. He pulled the trailer inside the large garage and closed the big metal doors. He locked them tight. Now, he was alone in the warm, yellow light of his workshop, standing next to a 12-foot alien woman. Mark dragged the alien off the trailer and onto a large, clear area of the concrete floor. He turned up the heat in the garage. He went to his toolbox and got his medical supplies. He didn't have bandages big enough for her, so he had to use gauze rolls and tape meant for horses or dogs that he kept for farm emergencies. He cleaned her wounds with water. The blue blood glowed. He looked for a pulse on her wrist. It was faint, but it was there. Her heart beat slowly and rhythmically. He noticed that her bones were very hard, almost like metal, but her skin was soft. While he was cleaning a deep cut on her shoulder, her eyes suddenly opened. Mark jumped back. He grabbed a heavy wrench, holding it up as a weapon. The alien's eyes were large and purple. They glowed in the dim light of the garage. She looked at Mark. Then she looked at the wrench. She tried to sit up, but she was too weak. She fell back onto the floor with a heavy thud. She spoke. Her voice was deep and sounded like music, but it was a language Mark had never heard before. It sounded like she was singing words. She looked angry and scared. "I don't understand," Mark said, lowering the wrench slightly. "I am not going to hurt you." The alien looked at him, confused. She narrowed her eyes. She raised her hand slightly. A small device on her wrist lit up. A mechanical voice came from the device. It was a translation machine. "Where am I?" the mechanical voice asked in English. "You are in my workshop," Mark said. "In the United States." "On Earth." The alien stared at him. "Earth, the primitive world." Mark frowned. "Primitive? Well, we aren't exactly flying around in spaceships yet, but we have indoor plumbing. So that's something." "Who are you?" the alien voice asked. "Why have you captured me?" "I haven't captured you," Mark said. "I saved you. Your ship crashed in my backyard. You were bleeding to death. I pulled you out. My name is Mark." "Mark," the alien repeated. "I am injured." "Yes, you are," Mark said. "I cleaned your cuts as best as I could. You lost a lot of blue blood." The alien tried to move her legs and winced in pain. "I cannot feel my legs. My core energy is low." "I don't know anything about core energy," Mark said. "But I know engines. If you have an engine, I can fix it." "I can fix anything." The alien looked at Mark. She saw a human male, small compared to her, covered in grease and mud, wearing a dirty raincoat. He did not look like a warrior. He looked like a worker. But she sensed no malice from him. She sensed kindness. This confused her. In her world, the weak were destroyed or used. This small creature had used his strength to save her, not to kill her. "My ship," she said. "The vortex drive. It is unstable. If it is not stabilized, it will detonate." Mark's eyes went wide. "Detonate like a bomb?" "Yes. A planetary explosion." Mark dropped the wrench. "Okay, that is bad. That is very bad. We need to go back to the ship." "I cannot walk," she said. Mark looked at the giant alien woman. He looked at the storm outside. He sighed. "All right. We will figure it out. But first, you rest. I have a cot in the corner. It is not big enough for you, but it is better than the floor." Mark went to a small storage closet and pulled out every cushion and pillow he could find. He built a soft pile for her head. He helped her move onto the cushions. She groaned in pain, but she looked more comfortable. "Thank you," the mechanical voice said. "Why do you help me, Mark of Earth?" Mark looked at her, then thought of Lily sleeping in the house. "Because if it was my little girl out there in the rain, I would hope someone would help her too. Now, get some sleep. I need to go check on my daughter." Mark turned off the main lights, leaving only a small lamp on in the corner. He walked to the door that led to the house. He looked back one last time. The alien princess was already asleep, her breathing slow and steady. Mark locked the door between the garage and the house. He stood in the kitchen, his hands shaking. He looked out the window. The rain was still falling. He had just dragged an alien into his garage. His life was never going to be the same. But for some reason, he didn't feel scared anymore. He felt responsible. He walked to Lily's room and peeked in. She was sleeping soundly. Mark smiled. He had to protect them both. Whatever this alien was, whatever danger was coming, Mark Cooper would handle it. He was a dad, after all. That is what dads do. 3 days passed since the night of the crash. The storm had cleared, leaving the sky a bright, clear blue. In the garage, the giant alien woman was finally waking up. Mark had been checking on her constantly, making sure she was drinking water and staying warm. He had moved her onto an old mattress he dragged out of the guest room. It was still too small for her, so her legs hung off the end, but it was better than the floor. Mark was working under a car in the driveway when he heard a loud sound from the garage. It sounded like metal bending. He wiped the grease off his hands and ran inside. The alien was sitting up. She looked dizzy. Her long silver hair was messy, and the bandages Mark had put on her arms were starting to come loose. She looked around the garage, her purple eyes filled with confusion. "Hey, take it easy," Mark said, holding his hands up. "You have been asleep for a long time. You lost a lot of blood." The alien woman turned her head sharply to look at him. She growled, a low sound in her throat. She tried to stand up, but her legs were too weak. She fell back onto the mattress with a heavy thud. "Where is my weapon?" she demanded. Her voice sounded raspy, but it was strong and commanding. "You don't have a weapon," Mark said calmly. He walked over to a table and picked up a piece of metal that looked like a broken handle. "I found this in the ship, but it was snapped in half. I put it over there." The alien looked at the broken metal part. She looked sad for a moment, then she looked back at Mark with suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked. "Are you a pirate, a bounty hunter?" Mark laughed. He couldn't help it. The idea of him, a guy who drove a beat-up pickup truck, being a space pirate was funny. "No, I am Mark. I am a mechanic. I live here with my daughter. I told you this before, but you were asleep." The alien stared at him. She touched a device on her wrist. It was cracked, but it still glowed. She tapped a few buttons, and a robotic voice spoke from it. "Translate," she said to the device. The device beeped. Language loaded, English, basic. The alien took a deep breath. "I am Aurelia," she said. Her English was perfect, but she spoke very formally, like she was reading from an old book. "Why have you not sold me? My body is worth a fortune to the right collector." Mark shook his head. "People don't sell other people here, Aurelia. At least, not where I live. You were hurt. I helped you. That is all." Aurelia looked confused. She was used to a galaxy where everyone wanted something. Power, money, technology. She had never met someone who helped just because it was the right thing to do. She looked around the garage again. She saw tools hanging on the walls, posters of old cars, and a small fridge. It was a simple place. "My ship," Aurelia said, her voice becoming urgent. "The vortex core. If it is not cooled, it will explode. It will destroy this whole region." "I know, you told me that before you passed out," Mark said. "I went back to the crash site. I covered the ship with a big tarp so no one can see it from the air. But I didn't know how to cool the core. It is leaking some blue glowing stuff. The fuel is unstable," Aurelia explained. "I need to return to the ship." "I can fix it." Mark looked at her legs. "You can't even stand up. How are you going to fix a ship?" Aurelia tried to move her legs again, but she winced in pain. She slammed her fist on the mattress in frustration. I am weak. This is humiliating. Don't worry about it, Mark said. I am pretty good at fixing things. If you tell me what to do, I can do the heavy lifting. Just then, the side door of the garage opened. A little girl with pigtails ran in. She was wearing a bright yellow raincoat, even though it wasn't raining. Daddy! Daddy! Lily shouted. She ran over to Mark and hugged his leg. Then, she looked at the giant alien woman sitting on the mattress. Lily's eyes went wide. Whoa! Mark put his hand on Lily's shoulder. Lily, this is Aurelia. She is a guest. Remember we talked about being polite. Lily let go of Mark's leg and walked slowly toward Aurelia. Aurelia watched the small human child. She had seen children of her own species, but they were trained to fight from birth. This human child looked soft and harmless. Yet, Lily walked right up to the 12-foot alien without fear. Hi, Lily said. You are very big. Are you a giant? Aurelia looked down at the tiny creature. She expected to feel annoyed, but she didn't. Lily's eyes were full of wonder, not fear. I am taller than average, Aurelia said. I am not a giant. I am a Violorian. That is a funny word, Lily said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crayon drawing. It was a picture of a house and a cat. I drew this for you. It's for you to get better. Lily held the picture up. Aurelia leaned forward. She looked at the crude drawing, made with wax on paper. It was a simple gift, but Aurelia felt a strange warmth in her chest. She gently took the paper with her large fingers, being very careful not to rip it. Thank you, Aurelia said softly. It is acceptable. Lily beamed. Do you like juice? I have apple juice. Lily, Mark said gently. Let Aurelia rest. She is tired. Okay, Lily said. She waved at Aurelia. Bye, giant lady. Lily ran back into the house. Aurelia watched her go. She looked at the drawing in her hand. She is brave, Aurelia said to Mark. She is 6, Mark said. She doesn't know any better. She thinks you are a superhero. Aurelia looked at the drawing again. In my world, children are not allowed to be soft. They are soldiers. Well, this is Earth, Mark said. Here, kids are allowed to be kids. Aurelia put the drawing down on a table next to her. She looked at Mark with a slightly different expression now. She saw him not just as a primitive mechanic, but as a father who raised a brave child. Mark, Aurelia said. I can fix the ship, but I need tools. My tools are broken. I need something that can conduct high amounts of energy. The vortex core needs a stabilizer. What kind of energy? Mark asked. Electricity, nuclear. It is plasma energy, Aurelia said. Do you have a power source, a battery? Mark thought for a moment. He scratched his beard. I have something. It is old, military tech. I bought it at an auction years ago. It is a nuclear battery from a Cold War era generator. I kept it because I thought it was cool, but I never used it. Will it fit? Aurelia asked. It is bulky and heavy, Mark said, but if we can rig it up, it might work. It has a lot of juice. Mark went to the back of the garage. He pulled away a tarp covering a large, lead-lined box. He opened it carefully. Inside was a large, gray metal cylinder with warning stickers on it. It hummed with power. Aurelia's eyes lit up when she saw it. Yes, she said. That will work. It is crude, but it has power. We have to move it to the ship, Mark said. But the ship is in the crater. We can't take my truck out there because the ground is too soft. We will use your sled, Aurelia said, pointing to a large wooden sled Mark used to move heavy engines around the shop. Okay, Mark said. But you are not coming. You need to rest. No, Aurelia said, trying to stand up again. This time, she used the wall to support herself. Her legs shook, but she locked her knees. She stood up, towering over Mark. I am the only one who knows how to connect the core. I must come. Mark looked at her. She looked unsteady, but her face was determined. All right, Mark said. But if you fall, I am carrying you back. And I am not joking about that. They loaded the heavy nuclear battery onto the wooden sled. It was incredibly heavy. Mark had to use his engine hoist to lift it onto the sled. Then, they began to move. Aurelia leaned on Mark for support, and Mark used both hands to pull the sled. They moved slowly out of the garage and toward the crater. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the scrapyard. It was a quiet evening. Birds were singing in the trees. It felt peaceful, despite the dangerous mission they were on. As they walked, Mark tried to make conversation. So, Aurelia. You are a Violorian. Is that far from here? Very far, Aurelia said. It would take your fastest ship 1,000 years to reach my home. 1,000 years, Mark whistled. That is a long commute. Do you have family there? Aurelia went silent for a moment. She looked at the sunset. I have a father. And brothers. But it is complicated. I hear that, Mark said. Family is always complicated. I have a brother who owes me $500. I haven't seen him in 2 years. Aurelia actually smiled. It was a small smile, but it was there. My family, debts are paid in blood, not money. Mark stopped pulling the sled and looked at her. That sounds rough. It is, she said. But here, with you, it is quiet. I like quiet. They reached the edge of the crater. The tarp Mark had put over the ship had blown partly away. The sleek black hull of the ship glinted in the twilight. Okay, Mark said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Down we go. They slowly made their way down the muddy slope. It was hard work. Mark slipped once, and Aurelia caught him. Despite her injuries, she was still incredibly strong. She held him up with one arm as if he weighed nothing. Thanks, Mark said. Keep moving, she said, but her voice was kind. When they reached the ship, they went inside. The air inside still smelled of burnt plastic. Aurelia led Mark to the engine room. In the center of the room was a glowing blue orb. It was pulsating, looking unstable. There, Aurelia pointed. The connection port is burnt out. We must bypass it. Mark placed the heavy nuclear battery near the engine. He opened his toolbox and got out his welding torch, heavy-duty cables, and pliers. Okay, Mark said. Tell me what to cut and what to connect. For the next 2 hours, they worked together. Aurelia sat on the floor and directed Mark. He climbed over pipes and crawled into tight spaces, splicing wires and connecting the alien technology to the old human battery. It was difficult work. The symbols on the ship were confusing, but Aurelia explained them simply. She told him that the blue cables were for power, and the red ones were for cooling. Mark used his mechanical knowledge to adapt the heavy cables of the battery to the delicate ports of the ship. Finally, Mark tightened the last bolt. He wiped his hands on a rag and stood up. "That should do it. Try it." Aurelia reached out and touched a panel on the wall. The lights in the ship flickered and turned on. The low hum of the engine returned, sounding steady and smooth. The blue orb stopped pulsating wildly and glowed with a soft, steady light. The ship was stable. "We did it," Mark said, smiling. "We saved the neighborhood." Aurelia let out a long breath. She leaned her head back against the wall. "Yes. The core is stable. You have a gift, Mark. For a primitive, you are surprisingly skilled." "I'll take that as a compliment," Mark said. Aurelia looked at him. She felt tired, but it was a good feeling. For the first time in many years, she did not feel alone. She looked at the grease on Mark's face and the bandages on her own arm. "Thank you," she said. "Truly." "You're welcome," Mark said. "Now, let's get back to the garage. I am starving, and I think Lily wants to show you her other drawings." Aurelia nodded. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She started to fall. Mark rushed forward and caught her. She was heavy, but he managed to hold her up. "I told you," Mark grunted. "If you fall, I carry you." Aurelia looked down at the human man holding her up. She wrapped one arm around his shoulder. "Perhaps," she said softly, "I will let you carry me this time." They slowly walked out of the ship, the two of them, a human and an alien, supporting each other under the light of the stars. For the next few weeks, life in the Cooper household settled into a strange but happy new routine. The crash in the scrapyard was covered up with old tarps and rusty metal sheets. To anyone driving past, it just looked like another pile of junk. But inside the garage, things were very different. Aurelia was healing fast. Her deep cuts were turning into thin scars, and her strength was returning. Mark was amazed at how quickly she recovered. He guessed that alien biology was just better than human biology. Every day after work, Mark would go into the garage with Lily. They would spend hours there. While Mark worked on fixing the smaller systems in Aurelia's ship, Lily would sit next to the giant alien woman. Aurelia had grown very fond of the little girl. At first, Aurelia just watched Lily with curiosity, but soon she was playing with her. Aurelia would use her advanced datapad to project holograms of stars, planets, and strange animals into the air of the garage. Lily would laugh and clap, trying to touch the light images. Aurelia taught Lily the names of constellations that human astronomers had not even discovered yet. In return, Lily taught Aurelia how to draw with crayons and how to make paper airplanes. Mark watched them often. He would lean against his tool bench, wiping grease from his hands, and smile. It was a strange sight. A huge, terrifying warrior princess sitting cross-legged on a concrete floor, carefully coloring a picture of a flower with a 6-year-old. "One day, your people will come for you," Mark said one evening. He was eating a sandwich while watching Aurelia explain to Lily how a black hole worked. Aurelia looked up. She looked sad. "Yes. They will come. But I am not ready to go back yet." "Why not?" Mark asked. "Isn't that your home?" "It is my duty," Aurelia said. "But it is not my home. My home is complicated. My father is the emperor. He is cold. He cares only about power. My brothers fight each other to be the next heir. It is a place of enemies, not family. She looked at Mark and then at Lily. Here, it is quiet. Here, I am Aurelia. Not the princess. Not the weapon. Mark nodded. Well, you can stay as long as you need. The ship isn't ready to fly yet anyway. The navigation computer is fried. I am trying to build a replacement part using an old gaming console I found in the basement. Aurelia smiled. You humans are very resourceful. You use trash to build miracles. We do our best, Mark said. The peaceful days did not last forever. One afternoon, Mark was in the front yard, mowing the grass. Lily was playing on the porch. Aurelia was inside the garage, meditating. The sky was clear and blue. Suddenly, Aurelia's eyes snapped open. She stood up instantly. Her sensitive hearing picked up a sound that Mark's human ears could not hear yet. It was a high-pitched whine, like a mosquito, but much louder. It came from above. She ran to the garage door and looked out. Flying high above the trees was a small, metallic object. It was a drone. It was shaped like a black arrow and moved silently through the air. It was scanning the area with a red laser beam. Aurelia's heart raced. It was a Violorian scout drone. Her people were looking for her. If they found her, they would destroy everything around her to cover up the evidence. She had to act fast. Mark had turned off the lawnmower. He saw the shadow of the drone pass over the yard. He looked up and shaded his eyes with his hand. Is that a bird? He asked himself. The drone suddenly changed direction. It had detected the unique energy signature of Aurelia's ship hidden in the scrap yard. It dived down, aiming straight for the garage. A small weapon under the drone began to charge up, glowing red. No! Aurelia shouted. She burst out of the garage. Mark saw the drone diving. He saw the red light. Lily! Get inside! Now! He screamed to his daughter. He grabbed a baseball bat from the porch and ran toward the garage, but he knew he couldn't fight a machine with a bat. The drone was fast, but Aurelia was faster. She was still healing, but the adrenaline pumping through her veins gave her strength. She reached the edge of the driveway just as the drone prepared to fire. It was aiming for the garage door. Aurelia looked around for a weapon. She saw the engine block of a 1970s muscle car that Mark had been restoring. It was made of cast iron and weighed 400 pounds. With a roar of effort, Aurelia grabbed the engine block. Her muscles bulged, and her silver hair whipped around her face. She lifted the massive engine off the ground and hurled it into the air like a stone. The engine block flew straight up. It collided with the drone with a loud crunch. The drone was smashed instantly. It spiraled out of control and crashed into the empty field next to the scrapyard. It exploded in a small ball of fire and black smoke. Mark skidded to a halt next to Aurelia. He looked at the smoke in the field, then he looked at the giant alien woman standing next to him. She was breathing hard, leaning against a fence post for support. Mark looked down at his hands, still holding the baseball bat. He looked back at her. He didn't scream. He didn't run away. He just looked annoyed. Great, Mark said, throwing the bat onto the grass. That was the engine for the GTO. I spent 3 months looking for that part. Do you know how hard it is to find cast iron these days? Aurelia looked at him, shocked. Mark. I just destroyed an enemy scout unit. I know, Mark said. I saw the laser. You saved my garage. And probably me and Lily. He walked over to her and checked her arms. Did you pull a muscle? You aren't fully healed yet. I am fine, Aurelia said, though she was rubbing her shoulder. But we are in trouble. That drone was a scout. It sent a signal before I destroyed it. They know I am here. Who knows you are here? Mark asked. The Royal Guard, Aurelia said, her voice dark. My father's elite soldiers. If they come, they will not ask questions. They will burn this planet to the ground to get me. Mark took a deep breath. He looked at his house. He looked at Lily, who was peeking out the front door, her eyes wide. He had worked hard to build a safe life for his daughter. He wasn't going to let anyone take it away, aliens or not. Okay, Mark said, his voice steady. If they are coming, we need to be ready. Mark, you cannot fight them, Aurelia said. They have power armor and plasma spears. You have a wrench. Mark walked over to his toolbox. He picked up his favorite heavy wrench and tapped it against his palm. I have this. And I have you. Plus, we have the ship. Aurelia looked at him. She saw no fear in his eyes. She saw only determination. It was the look of a parent protecting their child. It was a look she respected more than all the military training in the galaxy. We need to finish the ship, Aurelia said. If I can get the main shields online, I can protect the house. But I need help. The main power coupling is still broken. Show me what to do, Mark said. Lily can stay inside and watch cartoons. We have work to do. They walked back to the garage together. The mood had changed. It wasn't just a mechanic and his alien friend working on a hobby project anymore. It was a race against time. They went into the ship. It was dark inside, lit only by the blue glow of the core. Aurelia led Mark to a panel near the back of the ship. She pulled off the cover. I need to reconnect the flux lines, she explained. I will hold the lines apart. You need to weld the bypass circuit. But be careful. If the lines touch, they will vaporize you. Mark put on his welding mask. Vaporize me. Got it? Just tell me when. Aurelia took a deep breath. She grabbed two thick, sparking cables. Her hands shook as the electricity tried to pull them together. The energy was immense. Her skin glowed where the electricity touched her. Do it now, Mark. Mark stepped in. The sparks were flying everywhere, hitting his leather apron. The heat was intense, like opening an oven. He didn't flinch. He grabbed his welder and started to fuse the metal together. His hands were steady. He focused on the metal, ignoring the danger. He had to protect his family. Hold on, he grunted. I am trying. Aurelia shouted through gritted teeth. After a few tense minutes, Mark finished the weld. He pulled the welder away. Let go. Aurelia released the cables. They snapped into place, locked together by the new weld. The lights in the ship surged to full brightness. The humming of the engine became a loud, powerful roar. Mark pulled off his mask. He was sweating, and his eyebrows were singed, but he was smiling. We did it. Aurelia slumped to the floor, exhausted. The ship is online. Shields are at 50%. Weapons are active. Good, Mark said, helping her up. Because I think our guests have arrived. Aurelia looked out the ship's viewport. High above the clouds, the sky began to darken. It wasn't night falling. It was the shadow of massive ships descending through the atmosphere. 3 large, Jagged shapes broke through the clouds. They hovered over the scrapyard, blocking out the sun. The Violorian Royal Guard had arrived. The sky above the scrapyard turned dark. It was not night time, but the shadow of the three massive ships covered the sun. They were huge, black, and jagged, looking like sharp knives cutting through the clouds. They hovered silently over Mark's house and garage. The wind from their engines blew the trees sideways and sent trash cans rolling down the street. Mark stood in the middle of the scrapyard, looking up. He held his heavy wrench in his hand. Aurelia stood next to him. She looked tall and strong, her silver hair blowing in the wind, but Mark could see she was nervous. She was not wearing her royal armor, she was wearing one of Mark's old flannel shirts and a pair of oversized work pants because her suit was torn. "They are here," Aurelia said quietly. "The Royal Guard." "Are they here to rescue you?" Mark asked. Aurelia shook her head. "No. They are here to silence me. If I return alive, it creates a problem for my brothers. The commander will kill anyone who has seen me to keep the secret." Mark looked at his house. Lily was hiding inside, peeking through the curtains. He tightened his grip on his wrench. "Well, they aren't killing anyone on my property. Not today." A loud, booming voice echoed from the sky. It was so loud that the ground vibrated. "Princess Aurelia," the voice said. "By the order of the High Council, surrender immediately. Your little rebellion is over. Come out, and we will end this quickly." Aurelia took a step forward. "I am not surrendering," she yelled back. "Leave this planet. It is a protected world. It violates the laws of the galaxy to be here. We make the laws." The voice shouted back. "You have 1 minute." Suddenly, a bright beam of light shot down from the center ship. It landed in the middle of the scrapyard, right in front of Mark and Aurelia. The light was blinding. When it faded, a large metal ramp lowered to the ground. A figure walked down the ramp. He was a Violorian commander. He was taller than Aurelia, maybe 14 feet high. He wore shining black armor that looked like the scales of a dragon. His helmet covered his face, and he held a long spear that hummed with purple energy. 2 guards followed him, holding similar weapons. The commander stopped at the bottom of the ramp. He looked at the junk around him with disgust. Then he looked at Aurelia. He did not bow. He looked at her like she was dirt. "So," the commander said. "The princess ran to a mud ball. And she is wearing rags." Aurelia stood straight. "I am wearing the clothes of a friend, Commander Zil. Something you know nothing about." "I know only duty," Zil said. "And my duty is to execute you for treason. And to destroy the witnesses." Zil turned his helmeted face toward Mark. He laughed. It was a cold, mechanical sound. "And this is the warrior protecting you, a small, soft male. He looks like he would break if I breathed on him." Mark didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the commander. He remembered what Aurelia had taught him. Aliens, especially these warrior types, relied on fear and size. They expected humans to run away or cry. Mark did neither. He just stood there, looking like a dad who was tired of nonsense. "Step aside, human," Zil commanded. "Or I will crush you with my boot." Mark looked at the huge metal boot coming toward him. He looked at Lily watching from the window. He looked at Aurelia, who was ready to fight to the death to save them. Mark stepped forward. He tapped the wrench against his palm. "You know," Mark said loudly. "You guys are really rude. You fly up here, block out my sun, make a lot of noise, and you didn't even call ahead. Zil paused. He was confused by the human's behavior. Do you know who I am? I am Zil of the Violorian Guard. I have burned entire star systems. Yeah, well, I'm Mark of the scrapyard, Mark said. And I have a sign that says no trespassing. Can you read? The guards looked at each other. They did not understand this human. Zil grew angry. Enough. I will kill this pest first. Zil raised his energy spear. He pointed it right at Mark's chest. Aurelia screamed, no. She tried to jump in front of the spear, but she was still weak. She stumbled. Zil pulled the trigger. A bolt of purple energy shot out of the spear. It moved fast. There was no way Mark could dodge it. But Mark didn't try to dodge. He reached into his pocket and pressed a remote control he was holding. Beep beep beep. Suddenly, the ground beneath the commander exploded. Mark had buried his homemade defense system while he was mowing the lawn last week. It was a mix of high-pressure water pipes, fireworks, and old batteries he had rigged up. A massive geyser of muddy water and fire shot straight up into the air, hitting Zil and his guards. The explosion wasn't strong enough to kill them, but it was incredibly loud, messy, and disorienting. The mud covered their shiny black armor. The electricity from the batteries short-circuited their shields. The commander roared in anger as he fell backward into the mud. His spear flew out of his hand and landed near Mark's feet. The two guards were blown over, rolling in the dirt. Mark walked over and picked up the energy spear. It was heavy, but he managed to lift it. He pointed it at the commander, who was trying to stand up. The mud dripped from Zil's armor. You forgot to look down, Mark said. The entire scrapyard went silent. Aurelia stared at Mark with her mouth open. The two guards on the ground froze. They could not believe it. A primitive human had just used a trick to knock down the Empire's finest commander. Mark held the spear. He didn't know how to fire it, but they didn't know that. He looked dangerous. He looked fierce. I told you, Mark said, his voice low and serious. Get off my lawn. Zil stood up slowly. He was shaking with rage. He wiped mud from his helmet visor. He looked at the human holding the spear. He saw no fear in Mark's eyes. He saw something else. He saw the spirit of a predator, a creature that would do anything to protect its territory. You dare touch a commander of the Empire, Zil hissed. I touch what I want, Mark said. Now, take your ships and go. If I see you again, the next explosion won't be mud. It will be gasoline. Zil looked at his ship, then at Mark, then at Aurelia. He realized he couldn't win easily. The human had tricks. The human was not afraid. And Aurelia looked at the human with respect. If Zil killed Mark now, Aurelia would fight with the rage of 1,000 suns, even hurt. Zil stepped back. He signaled his guards to retreat. This is not over, human. We will return. And we will burn this world to ash. Bring it, Mark said. I have plenty of scrap. Zil and his guards walked back up the ramp. The ramp closed, and the ship rose into the air. The other two ships followed. They turned and flew away, disappearing into the sky. Mark lowered the spear and dropped it. He let out a long breath. His hands were shaking now that it was over. He had almost died. He looked at his flannel shirt. It was covered in grease and mud. Aurelia walked over to him. She looked at him as if he was a god. Mark, she whispered. You defeated Commander Zul. He is a legendary warrior. You humiliated him. I just used a sprinkler system and some fireworks, Mark said, rubbing his neck. He wasn't looking. You used your brain, Aurelia said. You used his arrogance against him. That is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. She looked at the house. Lily ran out the door. She ran straight to her dad and hugged his leg. Daddy! You made a big boom. Lily cheered. Mark laughed and picked her up. I did, Bug. I did. He looked at Aurelia. She was smiling. Your ship is fixed enough to fly, Aurelia. You should go. If they come back with more ships, I can't fight them all with mud. Aurelia looked at Mark. She looked at the scrapyard. She looked at the little girl in his arms. She realized that her place was here, for a moment longer. Or perhaps, she realized that humans were not the weak creatures her people thought they were. No, Aurelia said. I am the princess of the Violorian Empire. If Zul reports that he was defeated by a human, my father will want to know why. I will not run. I will return, but not as a fugitive. I will return as a conqueror. And I will tell them of the bravery of Earth. She touched Mark's shoulder gently. But first, we finish the repairs on your lawn. The silence that followed the departure of the Violorian ships was heavy. The sky was blue again, and the sun was shining, but the mood in the scrapyard was serious. Mark stood with his hands on his hips, staring at the muddy mess where the commander had landed. There were scorch marks on the grass and deep holes in the ground from his homemade defense system. Well, Mark said, breaking the quiet. This is going to take a lot of work to fix. Aurelia stood beside him. She looked up at the sky, watching the direction where the ships had disappeared. Her face was calm, but her eyes were intense. She knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. They will return, Mark, Aurelia said softly. Commander Zul does not like to lose. He will bring the entire fleet. Mark sighed and wiped some sweat from his forehead. I figured. But until then, we have a job to do. He turned toward the garage. The ship is ready, isn't it? Aurelia nodded. Yes. The repairs are complete. The engine is charged. I can leave. She walked back to the garage, and Mark followed. Lily ran ahead, holding Aurelia's hand. The little girl did not want her friend to leave. Inside the garage, the sleek black ship was humming with power. It looked beautiful, no longer a broken wreck, but a majestic vessel worthy of a princess. Aurelia walked up the ramp and stood at the entrance. She turned to face Mark and Lily. She was 12 feet tall, glowing with alien strength, but she looked sad to be leaving. Mark of Earth, she said, her voice formal but warm. I do not know how to thank you. You saved my life. You healed me. You protected me when even my own people wanted me dead. Mark smiled and shoved his hands into his pockets. You don't need to thank me, Aurelia. You're part of the family now. Well, the extended family. The part that lives in spaceships. You are a strange human, Aurelia said. But you are the bravest warrior I have ever met. She looked down at Lily. Lily was trying not to cry. She held up the piece of paper she had drawn days ago. You forgot your picture, Lily said, her voice shaking. Aurelia knelt down on one knee, bringing her face level with Lily. She gently took the drawing. I will never forget it, little one. I will hang it in the royal palace for everyone to see. Will you come back? Lily asked. Aurelia looked at Mark. Then she looked back at the stars visible through the open garage door. I must go home. I have to fix my empire. My father is old, and my brothers are cruel. If I do not return, many more people will suffer. But I promise you this, Lily. I will not leave this world defenseless. Aurelia pressed a button on her wrist device. A small, silver box appeared in her hand. She handed it to Mark. What is this? Mark asked. It is a planetary beacon, Aurelia explained. It broadcasts a signal. It tells everyone in the galaxy that this planet is under the protection of the Violorian princess. If anyone comes to hurt you, they will have to answer to me. Mark took the small box. It was light and felt warm. This is a lot of responsibility. Does it come with a manual? Aurelia laughed. It was a bright, happy sound. Just keep it safe, Mark. Suddenly, a loud boom shook the ground. They all looked up. Aurelia's ship was floating slightly off the ground. Its ramp was closing, but she was still standing on the concrete floor of the garage. She wasn't on the ship. Aren't you going? Mark asked. Not yet, Aurelia said. She turned around and looked at the 3 retreating ships on the horizon. Her eyes narrowed, and a look of pure power came over her face. I need to send a message first. She raised her right hand. A strange symbol appeared on her forehead, glowing with white light. She spoke a word in her own language that hurt Mark's ears just to hear. The sound was like a trumpet blast, but it was mental, not physical. A beam of light shot up from her, piercing through the roof of the garage and going straight into space. It was a communication signal. It was so strong that every radio, television, and cell phone in the state turned to static for a few seconds. Mark watched in awe. He saw Aurelia floating a few inches off the ground. Her hair was floating like she was underwater. She looked like a goddess. She was sending a message to the commander. She was telling him that she was alive, she was angry, and she was coming for him. The light faded, and Aurelia dropped back to the ground. She looked tired. What did you say? Mark asked. I told them who I am, Aurelia said. I am not just a runaway anymore. I am Aurelia, the true heir. And I declare Earth a protectorate of my house. Anyone who touches it dies. Mark nodded slowly. Okay. That sounds pretty clear. Aurelia looked at the ship. The ramp opened again. I must go now. My people need to see that their leader has returned. She hugged Lily gently, being very careful not to crush her. Goodbye, brave little warrior. Goodbye, Aurelia, Lily said, wiping her eyes. Aurelia stood up and looked at Mark. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They had fought aliens, fixed engines, and eaten dinner together. They had shared a life for a few weeks. Goodbye, Mark, Aurelia said. Take care of your daughter. She is special. I will, Mark said. You take care of yourself, princess. Don't let them change you. Aurelia smiled. They cannot change me. I have been to Earth. I know what true strength looks like now. She turned and walked up the ramp. The metal door closed behind her. A few seconds later, the engines roared to life. The ship lifted up. Mark and Lily ran outside to watch. The ship rose into the sky, faster and faster. It shot upward like a meteor, leaving a trail of white smoke behind it. In seconds, it was gone, a tiny star in the vast blue sky. Lily tugged on Mark's pants. She's gone, Daddy. Mark put his arm around Lily's shoulder. Yeah, Bug. She's gone. Are we safe now? Mark looked at the small silver box in his hand. He thought about the giant alien princess who colored pictures and threw car engines. He thought about the way she had looked at them with kindness instead of greed. Yeah, Mark said. I think we are safe. I think the whole galaxy knows now that you don't mess with the Coopers. He looked around his scrapyard. It was a mess. There was a crater in the back, holes all over the lawn, and mud everywhere. His truck was covered in dirt. It looked like a war zone. Well, Mark sighed, putting the silver box safely in his pocket. I guess I better get the shovel. Can I help? Lily asked. Sure, Mark said. You can hold the bucket. They walked back to the house, father and daughter, under the bright sun. Life was going to be different now. Mark knew that. One day, maybe Aurelia would come back, or maybe other aliens would come. But Mark wasn't worried. He was a dad, a mechanic, and a protector. He had fixed an alien ship and scared away a galactic army. Hey Dad, Lily asked as they walked. Yeah, sweetie. Do you think she liked the sandwich I gave her? Mark laughed. I think she loved it, Lily. I think she loved it a lot. They walked into the house, ready for lunch, while the silver beacon in Mark's pocket pulsed silently, watching over the sky.